Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, and I do some contract work for the HBAR Foundation. I wanted to take some time today and reflect on the past year in the Hedera ecosystem and look ahead to 2023. And I have the perfect guest to do that. We have Mance Harmon, the CEO of Swirls Labs and the co-founder of Hedera, and Shayne Higdon, the CEO of the HBAR Foundation. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Brandon.
Hi, Brandon.
Great to be here.
Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. This is going to be fun. I do want to make one thing clear. I've gotten this question a few times from people in the community. Swirls Labs, Hedera, and the HBAR Foundation are three separate entities working within the Hedera ecosystem. So again, I got some questions on that. Just want to clarify it before we got started. I'm going to start off by looking back. Mance, what are your thoughts on where the Hedera ecosystem is today compared to where you thought it would be 3 years along at Open Access?
Yeah. Well, look, maybe it's important for us to define what the ecosystem is. I think about the ecosystem holistically, and what I mean by that is, of course, it includes the organizations and the people that join us as part of the community and sort of the grassroots members that have found Hedera and decided to come along for the ride. But it also includes the council members and the organizations that the council members are working with and have brought along their journey to build on top of Hedera. And it also includes the organizations that now are major participants in the Hedera ecosystem that are in part or in whole funded by Hedera to do various things. So, of course, the HBAR Foundation is a great example of that. Swirls Labs is a good example of that. Hashgraph Association, and there may be others, probably will be others as well that come along. So it's, when we say ecosystem, it's a really big ecosystem, and sometimes they overlap and sometimes they don't, or they don't as much. And so I have to go back and think about when we all started this, what were expectations? When it comes to council, candidly, I'd hoped we would have been at 39 by now. Having said that, the council members that we have today are fantastic and very active. And that's only improved in the past 18 months to 2 years, and it continues to improve. I've said this before, we have more than reached critical mass in terms of what is needed to have a well-governed, well-respected organization and have the oversight that is so important to engender trust in the platform. And all of that now exists. But even beyond that, when we look at the projects that are being pursued by the council members, and we put together sort of a list, like you might include in a Salesforce list of projects that are maturing over time at various stages of maturity. That kind of thing. The number of projects has just exploded this year. And that's all goodness, right? That's all fantastic. That it does include council members and other third parties that the council members are bringing to the table to participate in these projects. So there really are, in some ways, two overlapping communities. I think that the council and its set of communities overlaps, but is different and distinct in some ways from the broader community that you and I talk to through these these forum, right? The webinars or podcasts or whatever. And now when it comes to that, when it comes to the community that we generally think of when we talk about the community, quote, that I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know when we started all of this how quickly the community would grow and what it would take to have a big, vibrant community that was really contributing. Now, am I happy with where we are today? Absolutely. And the community is just is growing. It's a vibrant community. And I attribute some of the growth, a lot of the growth, to Shayne and team at the HBAR Foundation and the work that they've been doing over the past year. We expected that to happen. It has happened. And so when we think about all of that in context, the real question I think you might be asking or alluding to is, are you happy with where we are at this stage, given what you expected 3 or 4 years ago. And the truth is, I am happy, and I didn't know what to expect. Both, right?
Sure.
And so, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. I think things are going great.
I will say for myself, I remember getting into the chat rooms and Telegram and talking with people about what to expect as far as what are our dream council members. And there were some of the team elders who came in and they were like, hey guys, back it off a little bit. Those are a little bit high flying. But what we have gotten as far as quality is exceeds all those expectations that we had in the early days. Of course, some of the dream council members that we had actually came to fruition. So it's been really impressive across the board. But Shayne, same question, but starting from the HBAR Foundation launch last September, are we where you would expect a year in?
I think we are. In fact, I'm more impressed with where we are. Our internal plan had us moving slower than we actually did, honestly. And I think that some of what we've been able to do has been unlocked by the progress made on the product. If you remember, EVM compatibility came at the beginning of the year. Smart Contracts 2.0 came at the beginning of the year. Continued developer integration with developer tools continues to mature. So those things have unlocked an ability for us as a foundation to give grants and move fast in building the ecosystem. When I think about what we achieved in the first 6 months, we did not give out our first grant of HBAR until February of this year. So we haven't even, executed a full year, even though we announced in September that we were creating the foundation. There was certainly a lot of expectation that we were ready to roll at that point, and we were still in the process of setting up the foundation and getting tokens, et cetera. In the first 6 months, just to highlight some of the things that we did, staking as a service, right, with Stater Labs. Now we have native staking as a part of, the network. Layer 2 interoperability via Hashport, a bunch of sustainability grants with Dovu and Timeless and Eversteady and Civic Ledger and others, retail use cases, multiple dexes now, whether you think of Saucer Swap, HeliSwap, others, Drop, Sparkle, SKUX, a bunch of financial services. We've got a lot of both council members and others tokenizing assets on the network, stable coins, and then council recruitment. You've seen a couple this year. The pipeline is significant and healthy. I think you're going to see some of that coming at the beginning of the year. And I think as we look at the pipeline, to Mance's point, with the level of engagement by council members, both existing and potentially new council members, there's a requirement that we really have a good understanding as to the use cases they are going to build. That's good, largely because they're going to build use cases on the network. I think about Aberdeen. Aberdeen is brand new. They, came out and publicly talked about tokenizing assets on Hedera, and they are a brand new council member, and they have certainly been heavily engaged, as have others. And so, as we think about that, that's just in the first 6 months of the year that we did most of those things. As I think about, and that's only just the tip of the iceberg. When we think about on ramps, multiple new wallets, Hashpack, Blade, Venly, exchanges like Coinbase, eToro, Bittrex, Mexiglobal, other custodians, industry verticals. So in terms of gaming's exploded on our network with Lithos and Metaverse and Vobble and Dropper. I could just rattle off so many others that I think have made us a destination for developers. We've seen, both Solana and Polygon projects moving over to Hedera. So we're doing a lot of the right things, and I think time is on our side in terms of, we're seeing a lot of the market, with many of the chains that were deemed leaders starting to kind of crumble a bit because there wasn't a real world set of use cases or sustainable economics or dApps on those chains. And so it's a little bit of the tortoise and the hare. We've taken much more of a tortoise approach, wanting to make sure that there are quality teams and applications building on the network. And candidly, it's taking a little bit longer, to see some of the fruits of our labor in terms of average daily TPS, but you can see it in the number of developers on the network. You can see it in the number of accounts. Just to give you an idea, when we created the foundation, there were just slightly over 300,000 accounts. Now we're over 1.4 million accounts in less than a year. And there are some use cases that are coming to the network that are going to orders of magnitude increase that. So I look at this situation in terms of the bear market we're in, what we've been doing. We've continued to make investments and grants, and I'm incredibly pleased with where we are, both at the product level and the team and the work the Swirls Labs team have been doing, and the team that the HBAR Foundation team have been doing.
Yeah, you make some fantastic points. I remember going back to the very beginning, 2019, 2020, there wasn't very many things you could do. And I thought, this is before open access, there was going to be a lot of things like the daily timestamp. And that's going back way back in the Hedera history. I thought there was going to be a lot of things like that. And for the first couple of years, we didn't see that. Now there's literally dozens of different applications that I use on a daily and weekly basis. So it's really impressive across the board. So Mance, considering the Hedera ecosystem as a whole, what makes you most proud?
Well, you know what? Hedera recently, I don't know, a couple of months ago, commissioned a third party to do a thorough analysis of the community in comparison to the other layer ones. And one thing really stuck out that made my day, made my H2. That was while the Hedera community is not as large as maybe some of the other communities are, if you're just looking at the numbers, we're off the charts when it comes to project loyalty. The Hedera community is loyal. They are not fair weather fans. And that just warms my heart, so to speak. Because I think what it reflects is that the people that are part of the community have truly bought into this vision and the approach and the tone that we've set within the community and for the larger crypto community. And that's what you want, right? We want people to go along on this ride with us that are true believers and are going to be with us for the long term. We've started from the very beginning saying we're building a company that we hope lasts 100 years. We want to build a 100-year company. And I think that there are members of the community that are going to be with us for years and years and years to come. That's it. That's what I'm most proud of. It reflects the same kind of values and sentiment that Lehman and I try to set from the top.
Well, I'm certainly not going anywhere, man. So, Shayne, looking over the past year, what has the HBAR Foundation accomplished that you're most proud of?
So if I think about what we've accomplished, and I say we, I mean, I don't think we can limit it to a discrete set of the HBAR Foundation did this. It's always been in collaboration with the community, Swirls Labs, in particular. And so if I think about it, it's really a category of applications that largely didn't exist in Web3. Now on Hedera.com, we've got an ecosystem page so you can look through all of the projects that have either been funded and or running on the network. And the Web3 applications is incredibly deep. I think maybe a year ago, you would have had, I don't know, a couple. Now you have, I don't know, 30. I haven't counted them, but it's a ton. If I also think about what else am I proud of, it's the continued engagement by enterprises around key applications. The supply chain situation, we're experiencing that due to high inflation and supply chains are slowing down. If you're trying to build a house, right, you've got to order your windows before you've even broken ground. I mean, it's crazy. And so there are so many organizations trying to solve that, leveraging DLT. That's exciting to me. You've got large organizations and asset managers looking at how tokenizing assets is really going to change the shape and way people invest in various assets. That's exciting to me to watch, whether those are real estate assets and others. So I'm proud of being able to make some of the first foray on our chain in these areas. and want to continue to do so. But it's not what, what we've done alone. It's what we've done as an ecosystem and a community.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Mance, I know this next one is like picking between your children, but if you had to pick one or a few use cases that impressed you most in 2022, what would it or they be?
Yeah, you're right. It is like choosing your favorite child. It's a really tough question. Look, there are a bunch of good ones. Zeus, of course, is very cool, and some of the collections on Zeus are cool. Hashpack, Ginfinity, and then you go into some of the other DeFi applications, Saucer Swap, and Healy Swap and Hashgraph Name. I could go on, and in so doing, I don't want any of those that don't get named to feel like that they aren't at the top of the list, because they're a bunch. And that's also gratifying, is to know how difficult it is to say that there's one or two, because there's so many that have been going to market. Honestly, frankly, it's difficult for me to keep up with all of the ones that are if anyone just looks at all the press releases that are coming out, especially from some of the projects that the foundation has been helping. It's the volume of projects in the market is just exploding. Lethos, of course, with Ashfall is going to be very cool. So it's difficult, but there are some that immediately come to mind.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. It is a little bit of an unfair question because it is like picking between your favorite kids, but I'm the same way. I've always said that micropayments are my favorite, and what Drop is doing is absolutely amazing. And I'm actually building an application in another area of the ecosystem. So, it is difficult, but Shayne, I'm going to throw the same thing to you. Same question. What use cases do you like most that came out in 2022?
Yeah, great question. There is something I'm really proud of that isn't a use case, but that I think is going to and will continue to incentivize developers. And that is the fact that we open sourced the consensus mechanism 100%. And so, comparing us previously to others where we weren't that, I think that is significant. I think we certainly need to continue to get the word out. So that to me it certainly bolsters a lot more developer activity on the network. I know it's not a use case, but that is key to casting a wider net to the developer ecosystem. From a use case perspective, I look at a lot of what we've done around Web3. I think is incredibly interesting. I'm an IT guy, i.e., an enterprise IT guy, and one of the compelling use cases that I think is interesting, because it's been a hard problem to solve. ServiceNow solved it with chargebacks and SLAs, and being able to, when you're an enterprise organization, IT is oftentimes a cost center. And so the business units get allocated a certain amount of IT budget. Well, oftentimes the business units decide to use more than what they've been allocated. Well, how do you charge that back? Well, today it's been very manual, very negotiation heavy. ServiceNow solved that through DLT. There is no argument. You use more than you're allotted, and you owe us as IT more money coming from the business in terms of budgeting. That's key when you've got a company like ServiceNow with $100 billion market cap and tens of thousands of customers. It's incredible. So that is exciting. And then, like I said, I don't want to call out any specific, but tokenizing assets, right? I mentioned Aberdeen, Toko with DLA Piper, and being that ability and to facilitate those tokenized assets, being the first to tokenize a debt instrument in the world was incredibly interesting and proves out the art of the possible. So I'm incredibly excited and certainly bullish on the things that are getting built on the network. It's what I've said, real problems being solved by real world use cases. That's what's going to win in this market.
I couldn't agree more. And along that same line of tokenizing assets, we have DCX that just came out recently, the Digital Commodities Exchange. And I was really impressed by that. I didn't know when we were actually going to have those kind of marketplaces in their traditional financial space, but, all of a sudden it just happened. So really impressive. All right, I'd like to move on to the council and enterprise use cases. Mance, I have to ask about the step function. I think it's become clear that the high volume use case that resulted in the talk about the step function in the summer of 2021 was probably pertaining to Atma.io. And this past summer, we saw similar excitement, but we're still waiting on the real ramp up. Have there been any lessons learned around how to communicate these enterprise level use cases?
Well, yeah, look, that's an interesting question. If I remember correctly, maybe it was a little earlier than the summer of 2021. I don't remember the first time that I mentioned the step function, but it goes pretty far back, right? It's been a long time, maybe longer than 18 months, something like that. What I will recall or do recall is that there wasn't a single use case that led me to make those comments. There were multiple use cases that led me to make those comments. It's also the case that to provide some explanation and transparency behind the original statements, the community will remember that Facebook decided that they were going to get in the game, and Libra was being introduced to the market. Well, the result of that was that there were a lot of big companies that decided they needed to get in the game as well, and they were moving incredibly fast. And we had the council members that were developing as well. And so that combination of things led me feel comfortable at that moment in time to say, hey, there's going to be a step function, and it's not going to be anything like what you've seen in the past. Mm-hmm. Now, what's happened since then? Well, several things. Enterprise use cases take longer to go to market, but now we're beginning to see some of that. And as you pointed out, the Atma use case alone is going to drive a huge step over what we have had. But it's also the case that the Libra project went sideways. It didn't go anywhere in any real sense. And it's interesting to have been here on the front row, seeing how all of that plays out in terms of macro market dynamics, because the lack of a huge potential competitor in the mainstream has caused the others that felt threatened and therefore needed to move to take a step back. And so there's been a delay and a slowing down, if you will, of the plans, frankly, that had been being pursued back at that moment in time. Of course, there's no way for me to kind of communicate all of this to the community. People wonder, okay, what's going on behind the step function and what is Mance seeing, et cetera, et cetera. And this is it, right? There are a lot of dynamics that go on into, well, you know, when you're in a position like mine, and you're trying to decide what do you say publicly, there is a probability distribution of outcomes, right? Of if you say something, what's the probability that it's going to be true? And you can have 0 probability when you're just making wild cavalier statements, and you can have 100% probability before you make the statement, in which case it's all already happened and the community hasn't really learned anything that it's not learning in a press release at about the same time. And the community, sure. What do they want to know? They want to know, give us some indication, like what's happening, what's going on. But if it's not 100% probability, then there are acts of nature that can just throw a wrench in the works, and you're just wrong. You feel like I'm 90% sure this is going to happen, and then something dramatic happens, and the probability distribution changes. Now, going back to the real question. Step function. The step function, I still believe, is coming. But what have I learned? I've learned that it's you have to be careful when evaluating that probability distribution. And you really have to balance you sort of addressing the desire of the community to know what's going on behind the scenes and under the hood against the possibility that things unexpected go wrong and happen and delay, and then you have community members that are upset or saying, "No, it was all made up," or whatever, right? So to summarize, what I would say is that there is a big step. I do expect the step to happen. If it doesn't happen in the short term, meaning weeks or months, I still expect it to happen. The macro level dynamics of everything that's going on in the Hedera ecosystem haven't changed. They've only improved. And for all those reasons, I still think there will be a step. But I've given up on predicting when that step's going to happen. Right? It's just impossible to know. And but I'm happy with where we are today.
I think most people understand that. So sticking with the council, we added 2 council members in 2022, Ubisoft and Aberdeen. How does the pipeline look, and what's the strategy of the various entities that are responsible for council member recruitment? We'll stick with Mance on this, even though I know the HBAR Foundation is one of those entities that's responsible for helping recruitment.
Yeah. So this year, there was a major change in the way that we do recruitment. As the community, I believe, knows, one of the big items this year was that Swirlds Labs got spun out of Hedera. As part of that transition, Lehman and I gave up some rights that we previously held, including the right to choose the council members and decide who would be invited to join the council. So there was a set of processes that we had in place that got replaced starting when the foundation was created, and then subsequently when Swirlds Labs got spun out. And so there was a period of time when things were in flux. And we created the membership committee for the first time this year, first actual usage of membership committee this year. And the membership committee went through a process this past summer of reevaluating the standards and requirements for potential council members, and also placing a large emphasis, really for the first time, on council members themselves participating in the activity of recruiting new council members. And so what we have today is, of course, we have various organizations, including the HBAR Foundation and Swirlds Labs to some degree and others, that are involved in council recruitment. When we see opportunities, of course, we pursue those opportunities that seem appropriate. But the lead really has been taken by MEMCOM within the council, and we see a pipeline of council members that are now coming to the project because they have use cases and they're somehow associated directly or indirectly with other things that might be going on in Hedera. And all of that's healthy. Right, that's exactly where we wanted to get to. We wanted to have a fully decentralized set of operations and governance, and this is just another checkbox in that path of getting the council to lead and be responsible for having a self-sustaining network, and we're now seeing that in recruitment.
So, taking all of that into consideration, what do you think the additions and the pace will look like for 2023?
I could believe, again, here you're asking me to predict, prognosticate.
I got to push you, man. I got to push you. So
I could believe that the pace picks up. Almost certainly the pace should pick up because it had, slowed down to such a big degree through that transition when the activities happened that we talked about, the spin out or the creation of the HBAR Foundation and the spin out of us, Swirlds Labs. The pipeline is healthy in a way that it wasn't through that transition, number one. But it's also the case that the council has very intentionally decided to raise the bar in the sense that when they invite a council member, the council member is going to be there to help grow the network, not just participate in the council as a member, sort of on the sidelines observing how things are going, but to help lead in the growth of Hedera, the ecosystem at large. So that places another burden on only including council members when they're ready to make those kinds of announcements, right? But at the same time, the pipeline is long. So I am hopeful that the rate of Additions to the council will go up, and the quality of those additions in terms of growth, network usage, et cetera, will go up as well. And at the same time, I understand how long it takes to get through this process and get council members to the point where they're willing to make public statements in that regard. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't know how long it'll take or how quickly the thing will, the rate of new members will grow. But what I can say is that the council is very functional as it is today, and it's healthy, and it's a lot of participation on the part of the council members in the various committees and in governance. So all of that is very encouraging, and everything seems to be moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I think we can be impatient at times as far as the community. That said, I think the strategy that you outlined is the right one to take. So, Shayne, like I mentioned, the HBAR Foundation does participate in council member recruitment. Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, it's certainly a significant part of what we do, largely because we're talking to the grantee, and oftentimes it's an enterprise grantee. And so we do take the opportunity to talk about what it would mean to become a governing council member. We have made it a requirement that you have to build a use case on the network. To Mance's point, that was more of a nice to have. And while there were most of the council members doing that anyway, it wasn't required. A lot of them likely joined the council due to a digital transformation or innovation agenda. So they wanted to learn about, DLT and blockchain in general. And what better way to do that than, help govern the network? We have more for our pipeline that we're tracking. We have more than 30 potential council members today that we are talking to, vetting, working with. It's at all levels of their organization. Keep in mind, in order to get on the council, they have to take it through their legal organizations. Well, you can imagine, in light of things happening, whether it's Terra Luna, whether it's FTX, et cetera, that's harder to do today because they want to understand what the risk exposure is to them of being a governing council member. I am pleased to say that there hasn't been anyone that I am aware of that has stepped away from their interest in Hedera because of what's happening in the crypto market. And that to me is incredibly positive because they see the innovation that Hedera can bring to both their business models and their innovation agenda around, technology. So I'm excited. I can't comment on the speed or pace, just given oftentimes how slow enterprises move, that they just want to be careful. They have major multinational, in many cases, most cases, billion-dollar brands that one misstep on something like that could be a material impact to them. And so I appreciate what they're going through. I also appreciate the community's desire to see, results faster. But, sometimes those two things are at odds with one another. And but with that said, I think we've given a little bit of some color in terms of what we're seeing in the level of engagement, the types of industry verticals we're targeting. And in many of them, we've got more than one option on joining the council. So I'm pleased with where we are. And, I think the rest of the community will be pleased as we emerge and go into 2023 and begin announcing some of these.
Yeah, it's good to hear, but you can understand why the community gets excited because when Aberdeen, who has $500 billion under management, is talking about tokenizing all their funds on Hedera, that's something to get excited about for sure. So, Mance, can you just remind us, when do the first council members start to roll off?
Yeah, so I believe it's the case that a little fewer than half of the first council members' first term expires at the end of next year. Now, my anticipation is that most of those, maybe all of those, would continue on into a second term. There is a voting process that's required for that to happen. The council has to agree for any given member that they can stay for a second term. And so it's not a foregone conclusion, but I would expect that most of them can stay for the second term. And then it's set up so that there will end up being sort of a rolling number of council members. In the long term at maturity, there'll be a rolling number of council members that are being replaced on an ongoing basis over time, so that you don't have a bunch leaving all at once if that's the way it worked out. And it's the case that the council can change that, right? If there is a problem, or if there's a desire to shorten it or extend it or make adjustments as necessary to ensure that we maintain a healthy council, maintain that critical mass that I've talked about in the past, then the council will end up doing that, right? So there's a lot of flexibility here. We put in the initial set of rules or bylaws, if you will, and currently it's what I've said. So a number of them would be moving into their second term in 2024. They would end their first term in 2023.
Okay, so I mean, we still have another potentially 4 years if they re-up of the initial council members. So that's a pretty good runway right off the bat.
Yeah.
So Shayne, is the council member use case development progressing the way you would expect? You know, we've seen a lot of development this year from LG and Toco and from ServiceNow, as you mentioned. Is that all progressing like you would like to see?
It is, and I think in addition to that, more close to 90% of the council members are actively developing use cases today on the network. And some of the use cases are use cases that are solving existing problems in their existing business, but in a new way, using new technology. Some are exploring, solving new challenges as a result of innovation or their business models shifting and changing, and they're leveraging DLT to do that. And so I am pleased with a lot of the youth. I'm also pleased with the creativity, candidly, of how many of these organizations are thinking about using Hedera. So it's exciting. I think it's been really, really encouraging, and I think you're going to continue to see them, get even deeper in terms of, not just one use case, but multiple use cases within an organization. That's exciting.
It is exciting for sure. So let's address the elephant in the room, something we've been dealing with for much of this year. Shayne, what are the impacts of the crypto downturn on the foundation?
So first of all, let me just state, and I don't think we've stated this publicly, while I feel it's incredibly unfortunate for those that, leverage FTX, for anything that they were doing. I'm certainly, sorry to hear what is happening and what has happened to them. We have had zero exposure to FTX. And so from that perspective, we have been fiscally conservative. We've made sure that the relationships that we've got are ones that are stable. We've done a lot of diligence in terms of, where we decided to put our treasury. And so that is something that I think, everyone within the community should know. Like any chain, I think that the token prices, coming down in this bear market, like anything, as you've got a lower token price, it just simply takes more HBAR to do a dollar denominated deal. That said, luckily, we've got a lot of treasury, and we've done, a really nice job at managing that, being aggressive, deploying over $350 million across 180 different grants. So we've really tried to cast a wide net. We certainly have some dry powder, and we're continuing to try to pick our spots and where we believe we need to continue to grow the ecosystem. I still feel really good about where we are, and that we have, continued to mitigate risk where we could, like with zero exposure to FTX.
That's encouraging. So, Mance, in your opinion, how's the downturn impacting the Hedera ecosystem as a whole? You mentioned some of this in a Twitter space we did recently, and I just wanted to tease that out a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So let me start by saying I think about this. The downturn is really being composed of two separate macro level things happening. One is just the economy is tanking, right? The economy is on the downswing, and interest rates are rising, and we have all the pain of layoffs and high inflation, et cetera, things that everyone understands and appreciates. And that ends up having an impact. But then separate from that, there is what's going on specifically within the world of crypto, right? FTX and the collapse of FTX, the collapse of some of the other platforms. And the two have separate types of impacts on the ecosystem at large. One is just cyclical and we'll get through it and everyone kind of understands it. The other one, though, is creating a crisis of trust generally for crypto as a space. That's a problem, right? That's a problem that is going to take a long time for our industry to overcome. Now, it's a terrible thing to have to deal with, but there are a couple of what you might consider silver lining associated with that. One is I do think it's going to result in regulations, and I'm hopeful that the regulations will be measured, and the regulators will not try to punish or destroy the industry. I don't think that would be the case, and therefore it will end up benefiting us. But secondly, the world now appreciates good governance in a way they didn't before, right? And we knew this was going to happen. We didn't know how long it would take, but we've always said there are two main value points associated with Hedera. One big one is the technology and all that it means and brings. And then the other one is the governance model, and that governance over time would be as important, if not more important, than the technology itself. People now understand, right? They get it. Why do you need a governing council that the market at large, the mainstream market at large, will trust to be honest and to do things the right way, right? The counterparty risk in this industry just historically is off the charts because you just can't trust anybody. And that's just not the case for Hedera. So I think it's good. I think it's good for Hedera in that people appreciate the trust that they have in the platform and the governance of the platform. It's also the case now, you alluded to something that I'd said in a Twitter Spaces earlier, that when it comes to the council members and some of the projects building on Hedera, but especially with the council members, it's as if we live in two different universes. There is sort of the crypto world that does care immensely about token price and DeFi and all that goes with it, right? And then there is the enterprise world that only cares about solving business problems. And they don't really even pay attention. It's not like they get up and the first thing on their web browser in the morning is CoinMarketCap, right? They just don't do that. We don't even talk about it in the council meetings. Certainly in no official capacity, if there is water cooler talk, it's just that, and it doesn't happen very often because it's not the focus. And so there are different interests at play here, and the interest in building solutions to real world problems that general managers will write a check for is off the charts. It's going in the right direction, like we said. And it's happening at the same time that the crypto market is collapsing, right? And so for all these reasons, I think that we're incredibly well positioned. None of this is a surprise. We've predicted that from the very beginning, and it's all playing out kind of as we'd hoped and expected.
Good to hear. And that echoes something that Stephen Edkins, the CEO of Digital Currency Group, Digital Commodities Exchange, mentioned. He mentioned that, their clients understand the difference between what happened with FTX and what they're trying to build on Hedera. But shifting gears here a little bit, considering my role at the foundation, this is certainly turning the spotlight back on myself a bit. But how do you think things are going with getting the word out about Hedera, and what metrics do you use to gauge this at Swirls Labs?
Look, it's a lot of the same metrics that you're going to see in a Masari report, right? Number of developers contributing, TVL growth, number of projects building. All of these are meaningful metrics that we're focused on and that are indicators of how well we're doing, not just in marketing. I mean, you can't just take marketing in a vacuum and say, how well is marketing doing? Because marketing depends on other parts of the body functioning appropriately, including us delivering product when product should be delivered, and council members getting ready to go to market and be able to make announcements and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Marketing is one major component of it, but the metrics that you typically find in an analyst report like Masari are designed in part to sort of give an indication of how all of those components are working well together to achieve the desired results. And so that's how we think about it. And I know Christian has his own particular metrics that he would be reviewing just from a pure marketing perspective. Maybe you have Christian on sometime to talk about that and go deep into what those might be. That might be interesting. But that's what I look at are the types of metrics that I've described.
Yeah, I'd love to get Christian on again. Shayne, so how do you think we could goose awareness about the Hedera ecosystem?
So I don't think it's a situation of unilaterally addressing awareness. I think there are pockets that know a lot about Hedera, and then I think there are pockets that know very little about Hedera. And then I think there are pockets that have known about Hedera from 3 years ago that don't have necessarily an update. And so it's a complex problem to solve in that you oftentimes have to be where those users are to get the attention of a developer. You've got to be where they're hanging out, right? And so that's one audience. You've got to be where retail hangs out, right? So how do you do that? Talking to some of the biggest banks on Wall Street that are starting to cover cryptocurrencies. You heard Larry Fink of BlackRock talk about tokenizing is going to just completely disrupt, the financial system. So it's a combination of things. Then you've got, the developers who still don't necessarily know, as I mentioned earlier, that, Hedera is fully open sourced. I was on the phone with a tier one venture capital firm last week who I said, how much do you know about Hedera? Oh, well, I know Hedera pretty well. And well, tell me some of the things you know. But one of the things that they said was that, it's a patented technology. Well, okay, it's patented, but guess what? It's now open source. And so it opens up a level of conversation. And I think some of it is we have to stay the course on what we're doing while expanding into these new audiences that I think need to become aware of it. And I think, when I think about, some of the Wall Street elements, I think about TradFi and the intersection of that. I think that we can lean into that. And I think some of our relationships and governing council members are helping us do that going into this new year.
Yeah, great points across the board. So, Mance, widening our lens a little bit, what's the biggest gap that needs to be filled from a network perspective going into the next year?
When I think about, so here in Swirlds Labs, we have a focus primarily on product as opposed to market segments and how do we grow particular market segments like what Shayne and his team would more likely be focused on. And from a product perspective, I'm looking forward to community nodes. We got staking out there now. Community nodes need to get completed in a meaningful way. Improvements to mirror nodes, and then later, I can't tell you how much later, but the next big step would be something along the lines of thinking about sharding. It's not required for the given usage that we have today, right? We have, even with the step function that's coming on, that we anticipate will be coming on, there's plenty of capacity in the network today. But there's a white paper out there that sort of outlines our vision for how this product matures over time, this operating system matures over time. And we're going to keep going down that path. And so we have steps that still need to be made. And from a product perspective, we just want to put one step in front of the other and finish it and get it done so that we can demonstrate to the market that this platform can scale in ways that the other platforms, the other layer ones, can't. And there's still a lot more to be done. But look, we made fantastic progress this year, and some big steps were taken, and we've got more to make next year.
All right, so continue down that path toward decentralization and also making sure that we can scale when it's necessary. So, Shayne, when you look at the ecosystem, what wasn't accomplished in the past year that you would want to focus on as we enter 2023?
Live use cases. We spent the majority of our time making grants to ensure that people are developing, leveraging the services, HCS, HTS, the contract service, et cetera. So laying that foundational, pun intended, groundwork for this last year. Starting in February, we continue to do that. Like I said, we made over $350 million worth of grants across 180 different projects. You've seen the explosive growth in the NFT community, which is super exciting. Want to continue to lean into, these digital collectibles that are happening. And so it's the live use cases, many of which the community knows about and are anxiously anticipating. So as we think about that being the gap, right, there's a delay from when you make a grant, they build something and it actually goes live on the network, and it's that delay that oftentimes the community doesn't want to recognize, right? We just made an announcement that, a particular grant is happening. Well, they expect almost the next day, many of them, that it's live on the network. And so going into 2023, there's a significant focus on grant success and effectively harvesting the great work that the collective ecosystem and team have done to ensure that the grantees have everything that they need to get it live on the network, be successful. And if not, we're here to figure out how to work with them, lend a helping hand to get them live on the network. And so I believe that we'll see more and more of those coming live in 2023 as a result of just time, candidly, a time from the time that they've gotten the grant to the work that they've done. There's a lot of complexity in getting that, hiring the development team, getting your vision in place and building. And so that's what I believe 2023 is going to be. And it's a perfect time, right? We've been building. The bear market began to happen in March. We continue to build. Look at all the grants that we've given, technology innovation that happened, the hips that have been checked off the list by Mance and team. And so, this is the time. And I think we're going to emerge as both an ecosystem and a chain stronger as a result. So that's what I believe we're going to focus on in 2023. And, the fruits of our labor will show themselves.
Great goals across the board. Mance, what are you most excited about in 2023?
Well, there's a lot to be excited about. There's one thing I thought that maybe I would share today that we haven't shared publicly yet. So, when Lehman and I, and the team, were still formally part of Hedera before Swirlds Labs, we had these, I think, monthly town halls. You'll remember those. The community will remember those. And it doesn't really make sense. It's not appropriate for us to be representing formally Hedera in that same way. But there's still an interest in hearing from me and Lee. And we recognize that. So what we're going to do an experiment. We're going to do an experiment in the new year. And that is that we're going to have a series of webinars. I don't know how often they will happen. We're going to figure this out as we go. But it's just going to be an informal discussion between me and Lehman. When Lehman and I get together for lunch, which happens quite frequently, all of this started with conversations at a Starbucks in Austin, Texas. A lot of people know that. Well, now we still have the same kinds of conversations, but it's happening here in Richardson. And there's a little restaurant down the street here that we go to frequently. And we have conversations that I think the community would appreciate hearing. And so we said, let's just have sort of like the equivalent of a fireside chat on a regular basis, just me and Lehman, on a given topic. We're going to call it First Principles. So First Principles with Lehman and Mance. And there are going to be a range of discussions. It's often going to be in the world of crypto and related to Hedera, but it's not going to exclusively be crypto. We have a lot of interests. We have a life outside of crypto, and all of you do as well. And so, like I said, it's going to be an experiment. If the community likes it, then great, we'll keep doing it. And if not, that's okay too. I don't know why people would necessarily care what we think about various topics, but we're gonna share our thoughts with you, and we'll have a discussion. So that's coming in 2023, early 2023.
Well, I don't think you need to be a prognosticator to foresee that the community is really going to like that. Shayne, is there anything else you'd like to pass on to the community before we let you go?
No, other than I'm excited by what Mance just announced. So I'm as excited to listen to those as the community. No, other than thank you for all of your dedication, all of your continued promotion. I watch things on Twitter all the time and appreciate it. It amazes me the content that gets created by the community. Their continued belief in all that we're doing. Just want to say thank you and hope you have a happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year.
Thank you, Shayne, and thanks for all the work that you do. Mance, is there anything else you'd like to pass on to the community?
Just the same. I hope you all, wish you all a happy holiday season, and looking forward to being back with you in the early new year. I'm looking forward and excited about 2023.
Well, we appreciate the time that you gave to us today. Thank you so much, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.